Okay. Gurudev, are you there? Can you
Yes,
hear me?
I am.
Okay. So, how are things? How are you doing? Do you have anything you'd like to share?
I'm fine, thank you. Everything is good. We're having a heat wave here, although it hasn't been as bad as some other parts of the West here, West Coast. Heat wave and a drought. All the reservoirs in California are drying up. So that's inauspicious.
That's because they're dumping the water in the ocean. They're not managing the water. They're just letting it flow.
We don't need that. Those kind of speculations actually be dry. It hasn't rained practically all winter, and so that's the reason for the drought. And then there's excessive heat. South of California and 120 in Los Angeles recently, so those are really hot temperatures. Naturally, the fresh water will be evaporated in such conditions. So at any rate, other than that, everything is well here at Odaria. And as far as I can tell, with the rest of the Sangha as well. So why don't we go ahead and take the questions?
Yeah, sure. So right now, there are two questions. I think devotees are just getting on later. So that's why I haven't been able to, the questions have been coming in later. So again, just if you have any questions, just message me. But right now there are two questions. So Kishore, do you want to ask your question?
Pranams Guru Maharaj. So I'm wondering about, we often see sadhakas become attracted to one form or one anga of bhakti, especially inspired by one or another. So I'm wondering if that attraction is a result of kind of karmic disposition, if it's bhakti kind of giving special mercy in that direction to individual sadhakas, or if it's the will of the jiva kind of in relation to the general mercy of bhakti.
Well, I think that the psychological makeup of the individual may dispose him or her to one anga of bhakti or another on the one hand. And on the other hand, one anga of bhakti or another may afford the particular devotee greater experiential, greater absorption and thereby experience, and thereby become the liked or preferred anga amongst so many. So I don't know how useful it is to try to determine exactly why. Any one of the reasons that you mentioned might be causal to one extent or another. But I think it largely applies to the psychology and the makeup of the devotee, which is obviously coming from two things, coming from their conditioned life, coming from previous influences of bhakti as well.
Gurudev, you just froze.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if that wasn't just me. Okay. I guess we'll just wait for him to come back.
Hello?
There we go.
Hello,
You're
can you hear me
back.
now?
Yeah.
Yeah, lost you. Well, so yeah, I would say there could be any number of factors that would determine that, but whichever anga affords one more absorption and thereby experience would naturally be the liked one. Why it does, probably because of the psychology of the devotee. And that it brings us to a larger issue, perhaps, the attraction of the devotee to a particular bhava. So typically that is a result of association, but in a marginal or in a peripheral, I should say, sense, it could be based on conditioning as well. So, for example, let's say there are two gurus steeped in different bhavas, and based on one's material conditioning, one likes one over the other. For example, one might have more of an intellectual appetite, karmically speaking, and one of the gurus may be more intellectual in their approach to presenting bhakti than the other. And so he or she might be attracted to that particular devotee without even knowing what bhava is driving either one of the guru figures to choose from. And so he or she chooses based on a particular but then as a result of that choice on that basis, or of course, he or she becomes influenced by that particular bhava in due course, that the guru who's been chosen is, driven by. So there could be, a material factor in that, relatively speaking, although ultimately the impressions that come from the bhava that drives a particular advanced Vaishnava, the guru figure, will be the determining factor, a culmination of those, perhaps over lifetimes. So I hope that answers your question. What else? Another question?
The next question is in the chat. It's from Rajhari. Do you see it? Because I don't.
On the chat.
Do you see it? Yeah.
Says, can you please elaborate on this inner eye mentioned in this comment? Is that the one you mean?
Yeah.
The comment is the, I don't know where's the comment from?
I don't know where the comment's from, maybe.
Yeah, it sounds a bit like him. So the book says the eye is necessary to acquire such an eye, an inner eye, divya-jñān, divine knowledge is a second eye, another eye within. At the sacred thread ceremony, the upanayana is meant to be imparted, another eye to see things around you. This is the eye of judgment, a theistic eye. So the whoever posted this or asked this wants me to come
Rudiv, you're frozen again. Keeps freezing up.
Hello? Frozen?
Okay, yeah, you're kind of periodically freezing. Like I couldn't hear the beginning of your answer to that question.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. All that's being said here is that one needs to develop spiritual eye to see. To see with spiritual eyes, that the material eyes, for example, unto themselves, are not going to reveal the nature of ultimate truth, Atashi Krishna Namadi Namadi. So material senses, to extend the idea beyond the eyes, can't afford us unto themselves direct experience of the Godhead. Neither a mind unto itself or intellect unto itself. So we need divine eyes, we need divine mind, a spiritualized intellect. And this comes through sadhusanga, through when we receive initiation, then we are taught to see, as the term goes, through the eyes of Shastra Chakshu, to have the eyes of scripture. So rather than to rely upon our material senses, eyes, etc., for knowing, we have another means of knowing, call it an eye, because we're using the metaphor of seeing. So how will we see God? Not with material eyes, but with spiritual eyes. And initiation means divya-jñān, so to impart divine knowledge, divine wisdom, typically in the form of a mantra. And so the repetition of the mantra is not a rational exercise. It's not really merely a sensual exercise, but it's a trans-rational exercise. And it affords a kind of knowing that you couldn't arrive at otherwise. So it's a different means of knowing. It's a different set of eyes for seeing. And this is a very, of course, important point, that under the influence of the angas of bhakti, when we engage in those angas and we are paying attention to what we're doing, there lies the potential for knowing in a way that you cannot know, even by reading the book or learning the philosophy, if you will. That is also important, learning the philosophy, and meant to help us become absorbed and come under the influence of bhakti, or this Krishna Swarup Shakti that bhakti is constituted of. But it's that influence that is it, the full measure of knowing. Bhakti is mentioned in the Gita as, the Raja Vidya, the king of knowledge. So we're so used to knowing or thinking that we will know through the exercise of our mental faculty, intellectual faculty, through empirically, through sense perception and so forth. But these are not ways of knowing in a comprehensive sense. And to arrive at that comprehensive knowing, there has to be a perfect means to arrive at that comprehensive knowledge. There has to be a perfect means of knowing. And it's not the way we normally think we will arrive at knowing. So it's very curious, and it's something that one has to experience through chanting, for example, knowing. And what you know through that experience, what you come to know by the grace of Harinam, by the grace of the anga of kirtan, for example, is something that you cannot fully express either in words or in thought that you write down philosophically. You may try to. Did you lose me there?
Yeah, yeah. Can you yeah, you stopped at like through chanting comes knowing, and I mean I guess that's what you've been talking about the whole time. So
Yeah.
I think I think we lost like 15, 20 seconds, maybe 15 seconds.
So it's a different kind of knowing, and a knowing that when you experience that kind of knowing, it's not something you can express fully through words or through writing about it and so forth. It's good to do that, but it can't do justice to it in full sense. So we need different eyes. We need, if we want to know God, we have to know God on God's terms. So revelation is what's being talked about. Revelation, a different kind of knowing, but beyond the power, the ken of the instruments that you have for knowing, which are counterfeit in terms of arriving at real and comprehensive knowledge. That's what's being discussed there. I see a comment here. If someone's inner vision reveals aspects of Bhagavan and awakens feelings for him that aren't relatable or supported by others in their life, should one simply remain silent, in solitude, prayerful, that someone supportive will come? Well, I think that we are members of a great tradition of Gaudiya Vedanta. And the founding charges of that tradition have very comprehensively elaborated upon in their books what is the nature of Bhagavan. For example, we have the Bhagavad Sandarbha. Originally, the Sat Sandarbha, Sat means six treatises or essays, was called the Bhagavad Sandarbha. Then it later became known as Sat Sandarbha. But within the Sat Sandarbha, one of them is the Bhagavad Sandarbha. We have the Bhagavad Tattva Sandarbha, the Bhagavad, and the Priti Sandarbha, so 6. So the Bhagavad Sandarbha is all about the nature of Bhagavan. And I don't think that, objectively speaking, you can find any other tradition or any other saintly persons who have given more information about the nature of God. Whether you believe in God or not, or whether you believe what they say or not, is another thing. We do. That's why we're Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And one of the reasons we do is because there's more information about the nature of God here than you can find anywhere. A lot of schools of theology in other traditions are about whether there is God or not, and not so much about what is. I'm back. I was saying that some schools, many schools of theology are all about whether or not God exists. We do that too in our theology, but we excel in what God's like. I've seen little tracts, little pamphlets from Christians before that depict God with no face, and they say God has no face, or, can't be seen. So comparatively, Vaishnavism, and within that Gaudiya Vaishnavism, has spoken more or revealed more amongst the religious traditions around the world about the nature of God, then all of them put together. What is the nature? I have been thinking, was talking again about it yesterday with devotees here about writing a book about heaven, if you will, or the spiritual realm as it is understood in Christianity, in Islam, in Nirvana, of Buddhism, the Vaikuntha of the Brahman, Nirvisesh Brahma of Shankar, and so on and so forth. Chapter on each of the different heavens, if you will. Well, the chapter, it talks about it from the Vaishnava point of view, and from the Gaudiya Vaishnava, probably be longer than the rest of the whole, book put together. So, it's a significant, very significant contribution to the religious world. So we are fortunately members of the Gaudiya Sampradaya. And while we practice and we may get some insight as to the nature of God and develop certain sentiments for God, I think it's incumbent upon us as members of the Gaudiya Sampradaya to look and see whether what we are feeling and thinking as a result of our practice corresponds, and to what extent, with a huge, a vast amount of information about the nature of God. And I mean, just to give the two categories of Aishvarya and Madhurya, the reverential love and love and intimacy, these two divisions. I mean, that, what to speak of then going within those, what is Samipya, what is Sarupya, what is Salokya, what is Sarshti, different types of statuses within reverential love, what is Dasya, Sakya, Madhurya, different types, and so on and so forth. All these are feelings that, corresponding object of God. God shows himself or reciprocates in relation to those feelings, which are arising in one who has simultaneously lost interest in other worldly ideas and so on and so forth. So there are symptoms as well by which we can determine this person is worth listening to when speaking about God, and this person may not be. So given that wealth that we have in our tradition, we have much to look to confirm what experience we might have, or feelings or thoughts we might have as to the nature of God from our practice, and determine to what extent those feelings, experiences are within the scope of what they've talked about. If they're outside of it, then they, I think there's good reason for them to be questionable. And I mean, someone could have profound experiences outside of that, but they would be so profound that they would be able to begin to start a sampradaya about it, right? And support it philosophically. And that's the other thing is, these are, like I said, there are some symptoms by which we can determine who's qualified and so forth. So, I mean, you give some ideas about the nature of God, as Jiva Swami has, for example, in Bhagavad Sandarbha, and then he's he's giving a foundation for those thinkings of philosophy and valid interpretation of the sacred texts and so forth. It's far from make it up as you go along. And I just say this because there are all kinds of people that think God's talking to them. There are many people in the United States now would think that God is talking to them and telling them that Donald Trump is going to be reinstated as the president in a couple of weeks. I mean, they're just absolutely nuts. They have no idea. They're just totally totally misinformed. And many, and as I say, many of them are thinking that some kind of divine revelation and God is talking to them in some kind of code, and their task is to sort it out, and they've got some secret inside wisdom about God, and he's holding Donald Trump's hand, I mean, so is there anything we could check that against to determine whether that's just some wayward mind of a conditioned soul, as opposed to it actually being accurately information about the voice of the desires of the Godhead? Well, a lot of this kind of thinking comes from some Christian evangelicals and Christian fundamentalism. So let's refer to the Bible. What does it say? I mean, I think even if you refer to the Bible, you look closely, you see that couldn't possibly be true. This person doesn't represent God at all. But there's very little there in comparison. Still, they should do that, and some thoughtful people do from the Christian tradition, and therefore they dismiss these ideas as being fanciful and so forth. So overall, I think that it's the sacred text. It's kind of the idea, or in an overarching sense, of the sacred text. There's revelation from the Godhead from that side. There's a body of that. It's useful to help us in terms of helping us distinguish what is God, what does God want, or what is God realization, what is the nature of God, so on and so forth, in comparison to what we might come up with just on our own, in our own mind. I mean, and that's basically even what Christianity says about the Bible. I don't care what you think. What does the Bible say? Of course, then what's their interpretation of the Bible? We have to look and see whether that makes sense. So, what else? Okay, I see another question here. It's a question from Michael. He says, Pranams Maharaj, being mainly drawn to this feeling of friendly love with Krishna as the lovely cowherd boy, how do we develop our attraction to other forms of the Lord? How do we develop our relationship with Radharani? Well, if one is attracted to Sakirasa in some basic sense, but having but the basis of that, of course, being in a lineage where that sentiment can be found, which is the case for ourselves here in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and a prominent expression of that came in my Guru Maharaj, who's touched all of us. So it's understandable that someone might have that inclination. But to your question, how do we develop attraction to other forms of the Lord? Well, if you understand Krishna, Gopala Krishna, the cowherd, as Swami Bhagavan, so the fountainhead of all forms of divinity, as we teach, then the more you develop affinity for, attraction to, love for Gopala Krishna, without having to think about it, naturally you're going to like other forms of himself, where he is doing something specific in relation to other devotees who love him in another way. You don't have to try in one sense. And in another sense, we're not trying to become attracted to other forms. We're trying to become attracted to one form. And if you have genuine attraction, really spiritually developed attraction, raga, for that form of God, then it's like anyone else that you love. If you love your wife, then in a sense, you know her better than anyone. Others know aspects of her that you know, and they are focused only on that aspect. That's another form of her, for example, how she may be at work, and so forth. And if you hear about that, then you more, and that is emphasized. You don't have any trouble figuring out how to like that. It's an aspect of the person that you love. So when we see Krishna, Gopal Krishna in Ram Lila, doing as he does, of course, we'll be attracted. If you're attracted to Gopal Krishna's outward, then you'll like Ram's relationship with Lakshman, which is the nature of Sakhya, also paternal love. But he's wonderful in whatever he does, in whatever form. Even, of course, Bhakti Vinod had this Saragarahi perspective that he emphasized. And he said, when I go to a different church of a different tradition, I see that, they look at him like this here, and they worship him in this way here. So I think thoughts like that would be helpful. In regard to Radha, you ask how to develop a relationship with Radha. Well, there's some, math to that, in a sense. We know that Krishna loves Radha. So if you do the math, then you figure out, well, if Krishna loves Radha, if I please Radha, Krishna will be pleased with me if I want to please Krishna. So that said, in the Arma Sakabhav, where the Sakas who love Krishna are also participating from their fraternal love's perspective from Sakyarasa in his romantic life and assisting him, then we find, for example, the leader of those, Subal, is also a servant of Radha. So should have a service, some reverence for Radha in the context of our friendship with Krishna. Those things will come very, very naturally. The more you hear about Krishna in fraternal love, the more you're going to hear about also his romantic life. So what's important to him will become important to you. And then in the context of the Leela, then certain friends of Krishna, they have opportunities to serve Radha as well as serve Krishna. So I've written about all of this in my forthcoming book, Circle of Friends. So I think you'll get a lot from that. I appreciate your question. I see Anupam Devi Dasi has written something. Shall I read it?
Pranada has a
Okay, Pranada, go ahead.
yeah, Pranada, and then maybe that one, the question could be translated.
Okay. Pranada, come in.
I'm trying to come in.
There you are.
How do we have two statements. We have something about that Krishna is merciful to the most fallen. And we have a statement that he rarely gives bhava and prema. So my question is, how are we harmonizing these two statements? Because I wouldn't think that we would say that when they're no longer most fallen, then he'll give them the mercy of bhava and prema. But we would hope that he would give the mercy to the most fallen. Seems that there's a difference between the two, and if you could comment on that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's said that the Vaishnavas, the sadhus, Vaishnava sadhus, they are the Kripa Shakti of Krishna. So Krishna's Kripa, Krishna's mercy, the power of his mercy is primarily manifest as the devotees. Krishna is compassionate to his devotees, but his devotees are compassionate even to non-devotees. They interact with them in this world, minister to them, and so on and so forth. So, so Krishna is merciful to all people through the agency of his devotees, who are the bearers of bhakti. And wherever they distribute bhakti, then Krishna has to go there. So in that way, Krishna is merciful to all kinds of people, right? Not just advanced devotees. And the mercy is such that they persons are able to begin to traverse the course of bhakti. And from the execution of their bhakti, what we're finding is the measure or the extent to which they are taking advantage of that mercy. That they are, let's say you're very merciful to someone, and you give them, a large sum of money. Let's say you have a daughter and you want to help her, and so you give her some money so that she can get started and get somewhere, in life. And then you find out that she takes the money and she just wastes it. Then you're mercifully disposed towards her, but you're going to hold back on giving her more money. So how we take advantage of the mercy, we're said to advance in bhakti through two things: mercy and effort. Right? Now, we make an effort to get more mercy. That's the nature of the effort in bhakti. It's different than the effort in jnana and yoga. Maybe some similarities. But basically, we're endeavoring to get grace, rather than just think that on our own strength we're going to transcend material nature through knowledge, for example, which is a manifestation of sattva guna. How will sattva guna get us to the nirguna? So we need help from the nirguna side, right? We need grace. We want to position ourselves, that's our effort, to get more grace. So if your daughter, in my example, had positioned herself by applying herself in terms of effort in relation to the mercy in the form of the grant that you gave her, then you'll be more disposed to give her more mercy. So her effort has accrued, so to speak, or attracted more grace. Now, this means effort in the context of bhakti. So there's no material qualification that one can do that qualify oneself. We should give this person bhakti because he's very smart. We should give this person bhakti because she's very pious. No, that's not the criteria. We give it to everybody. So Krishna, through the agency of his devotees, gives bhakti to anyone and everyone without discrimination. Their material qualification has no bearing on whether or not they are potentially recipients of bhakti and thereby the grace of Bhagavan. Bhakti is, in a sense, the grace of Bhagavan. Now, once they're devotees and on the path, Then there are some levels of qualification within bhakti, how they're applying themselves in relation to bhakti. So the statement that you referred to from the Bhagavatam, it's also there in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. I think at the 5th canto of the Bhagavatam, it's described that Bhagavan does not give praying or bhav or whatever said very, very easily. Similarly, in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it's mentioned that bhav is sudurlabh, very rarely attained. But there, Jiva Goswami, of course, explains that it means even if you do all the sadhanas of Sankhya or all the sadhanas of yoga or other traditions, you're not going to get bhava from Krishna. But only if you do sadhana with the heart, with attraction, where it's not just a mechanical exercise, but actually heart exercise, which is going to happen in the full sense of the term in the higher stages of sadhana bhakti. When you don't have anything else in your heart, like Mahaprabhu says, nadanam najanam nasundarim kavitam va. I don't have attraction for anything else in the world. I only have attraction for bhakti. And one has taste for bhakti. One doesn't have a taste for anything else. So in ruchi and asakti, one is giving oneself in such a way that bhava will come. Prior to that, why should it come? It's still there. Bhakti is there, doing work, exposing the shortcomings of other ideas, false values, and so on and so forth. So one should make an effort to let go of those things when it becomes apparent that that's necessary, for me to progress and make the next to go forward and so forth. Everything won't be clear at once, what I should let go of, or to what extent. But ultimately, as I say, Mahaprabhu said, nadanam najanam nasundaram, that covers everything in the whole world if you look at it carefully. Mama janmani janmanishvara, not even desiring liberation. So again, the idea is that one is giving oneself fully with the heart, one is taking advantage of the mercy that has been given, because both things are required, right? Effort and mercy. Then, and I guess you could say, then that's rare, or it takes some time. So this is the explanation of why Krishna doesn't give bhava easily, if you will. Does that help? Maybe it doesn't.
Yes, it does. And what you, the way you just described something of bhakti in the earlier stages of sadhana, giving mercy in the form of showing us what needs to be removed so that we can do the work. That just struck me. I think probably I've heard that before, but it just struck me as, because I always think of bhakti as going to give me a taste or a realization of the higher realm or connection with Krishna. But stating it that way is quite
Works
powerful,
that way.
because we get a lot of that actually. So we could say bhakti is very active in my life when I'm seeing that.
Yeah, if you're going to cleanse a room, then you're going to find out, oh man, there's a lot dirtier here than I thought. You're going to see things that, in the context of the cleansing process, that bhakti is shedding light on. Look over there. Did you get that? Pick up the rug. Open the closet. See how everything falls out. Wait a minute. So yeah. So make the effort. Take advantage of the mercy that you have.
And so we can be fallen and still be gifted with the highest.
Yes. Highest opportunity to take advantage of. So, if you don't want it, then why should you give it? If you really want it, if I say I want it, but I want all kinds of other things at the same time, then you don't, how much do you really want it? And how much instead, maybe you just want freedom from the things that are bothering you. So something like that. What else? We have from Annapurna. She says, oh, it's in Spanish. So yeah, the question isn't clear, but by the grace of the Guru, Vaishnavas, Bhagavan, we make progress. But if you're referring to paintings, for example, Prabhupada, and maybe this is what the question is about, used to call the paintings from in his books like windows to the spiritual world. And so you could get the impression from that as someone was painting it, they were empowered, to see the spiritual world, and they're drawing it exactly as it is. And I've heard some devotees, interpret the paintings like that. One devotee told me that you have to realize that Prabhupada, revealed to the world through these paintings to the BBT artists that he empowered. So what God was like that's never been revealed before. I said, well, there have been thousands of paintings in India, about Krishna and Krishna Lila, prior to the BBT. So not to diminish their contribution. But I mean, these paintings are approximations, obviously, of something that if thought and word cannot do to it, neither can the pen and the canvas. But they're approximations. If those approximations please a devotee, like Prabhupada, then then they have more credibility, if you will. But to have the eye to see in the spiritual world, that is a result of grace, obviously. Grace, which translates into spiritual progress one has made. It's the ability to put the philosophy together in such a way that you land on your feet. What is the nature of rasa tattva, for example? You want to talk about pictures of Krishna Lila, or you want to write about Krishna Lila. Those expressions, however poetic or artistic, have to conform with the tattva that underlies the nature of rasa, and how some rasas are compatible, how some are not, and so on and so forth. So the question wasn't entirely clear, but I hope I've answered to your satisfaction. Are there any other questions?
There's one from Sham Das. Yeah. So I don't know if they were just sending me the question in the chat or they were kind of, Sham Das, can you? It was
Sham
about
Das.
Rath Yatra.
Rath Yatra, well, that's a big festival for Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of course, participated in the Rath Yatra, and his associates from Bengal, from Navadvip, would come annually, and on the pretext of coming to Rath Yatra, they would get the association of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But it was a tradition, regardless of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu going there, for pilgrims to come from Navadvip to Jagannath Puri for the occasion of the Rath Yatra. Prabhupada personally told me that it's something that he had told others as well, but one day he just called me to his room at his bedside, and he said, when I was a boy, then my aspiration was to somehow get enough money to take the train to go to Jagannath Puri to participate in the Rath Yatra. And more or less, he said, I was so insistent upon going that my father got me a toy Rath or cart and to play Rath Yatra. He says, and I performed the Rath Yatra, and neighbors came and participated. And they thought, he told me, that it was play, but his eyes became very wide and said, but it was real. He said he told me he used to keep the cart by his bed, and he would wake up in the night to reach out and touch it and make sure it was really there. So it's an example of a Gaudiya Vaishnava's attraction to Rath Yatra. And if we study Chaitanya Charitamrita in the Madhya Lila, then there's much said there by Krishnadas Kaviraj as to why Rath Yatra is so central to the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. Now, it may mean different things to different persons. Jagannath is literally Jagannath. Jagat means the world, Nath means the Lord of the world, so Lord of the universe. So many people come with different conceptions of God, and they look at Jagannath through that lens. Some Buddhists worship Jagannath, for example, the Shankar people there, they have their Govardhan Mat in Jagannath Puri, and they're the pujaris there, and they worship Jagannath as Saguna Brahman, as a manifestation of the Nirvisesh Brahma with qualities, material qualities. So it's not the way we look at Jagannath. We look at it, Jagannath, the way Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did, which is described in Chaitanya Charitamrita, that he saw Jagannath. When he saw him, he had a peacock and was carrying a flute. His eyes are wide. The implication of this is that he is looking for Radha. Where is she? And Balaram and Subhadra are looking at him, and their eyes are becoming wide, seeing him. And of course, their bodies are contorted, which is meant to depict, from our perspective, sattvic bhavas, transformations of the body in the ecstasy of Braj. So Puri is a moment in the Dwarka Lila of Krishna, a moment in which Krishna is reflecting back on Braj and Radha's love for him therein. And so it's, as Sridhar Maharaj put it, it's a train wreck between the Dwarka conception, which has Aishwarya in the sense that Krishna is God, and the Vrindavan conception, which doesn't see him in that way, sees him in intimacy, because the two are crashing. Jagannath's been in a train wreck. So The Rath Yatra then, of course, is bringing Jagannath, bringing Krishna in Dwarka, Kurukshetra, where the Brajabasis have also been invited to observe the religious performances surrounding the solar eclipse, which was a big event. So in Kurukshetra, they set up like an Olympic city, like when they do the Olympics in the world now, they set up a virtual city for it that's going to last for however long, a month or whatever, however long the Olympics last. So you can imagine they set up a whole temporary city, fairgrounds, to observe the solar eclipse in the Kurukshetra. Kurukshetra and the Brajabasis were also invited, all people were invited. So they came in their covered wagons, their pulled by bullocks and so forth, and looked a little out of place for that very sophisticated royal event. Krishna came Balaram riding on elephants. That's a sign of opulence. It takes 200 pounds of food to feed an elephant a day. You got to have a lot of money to have pet elephants. So meanwhile, the poor village people were coming on bullock carts. Yashoda came to the gate and said, "Let me in." They said, "Who are you? Have you got tickets?" And so forth. And she's claiming to be the mother of Krishna. And the guards are going, "What are you talking about? Devaki's his mother. Who is this crazy lady?" So anyway, she's so insistent, the word gets back to Krishna. He says, "Let her in right away." The guards, well, what? Oh, okay, he says, "Let her in." And then Braj people come in and so forth. And so, of course, ultimately, Krishna speaks with gopis, described in the Bhagavatam. Asli was described in the Bhagavatam. And at that time, in private, he speaks with them and expresses the fact that I'm here physically, but my mind is with you in Vrindavan. Morman Vrindavan. My mind is Vrindavan. My heart is there. I'm here for superficial reasons. It appears that I'm here, but really I'm there. So he gives that kind of a confirmation to them. And emphasizes to us the nature of the love of Vrindavan. While he may be physically present elsewhere, he's actually more present in Vrindavan, where the love for him is greater. How can he not be there if there's love for him? If there's love, there has to be the object of love. So where there is love for Krishna, Krishna is present. And so the Rath Yatra is about bringing Krishna back to Vrindavan. He gets as far as Kurukshetra, but Vrindavan people come to him, and then he expresses the idea that I'm present there in your love for me more than I am anywhere else. Something like that. I mean, it's a big subject, and there are several chapters covering it. And in the Rath Yatra, of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he to one extent or another enters into the bhav of Radha, and thus his dancing is equivalent to the dancing of Radha, and Jagannath is stunned by the dancing. So the carts stop, and they can't move, and they get elephants to push the carts, and they won't move. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu picks up the rope, pulls, then the cart moves. So Jagannath is stunned by the dancing of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which is evidence that Mahaprabhu is getting some success. Krishna is getting some success in terms of the reason for his advent, the internal reason to enter into the bhav of Radha. So it's a beautiful love drama throughout the Yatra, and seen through the eyes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates. Jagannath Swami ki jai. Rath Yatra ki jai. So with that, we end for today. Thank you all for your time and interest and questions, and I hope to be with you again next week for Bhagavan Divya-jñān.
Thank you. I will make some announcements for this week's classes. Sorry, I just have to open up my email. I usually have it open, but not today. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, here we go. So on Mondays, Padmanabha Swami is giving classes on the Brahmara Gita, the Song of the Bumblebee. And on Tuesdays, Ashram Maharaj is giving classes for Vaishnav Sampradayas, a brief intro to the schools of bhakti. On Wednesdays, Dulal is giving classes on Krishna Sandarbha. And then on Thursdays, Archana is doing her interviews, the beauty and messiness of a Sadhaka's journey. And then on Fridays, Krishna Chaitanya is giving his classes, Dasya, Sakya, Vaidhi Rag, what, so what, now what? On Saturdays, Atula Nanda Swami is giving classes on the qualities of bhakti. And then on Sundays, we're back here. Alrighty, well, thank you so much, everyone. I see 2 chats. Okay, there we go. I will see all of you next week. I don't know, I don't think I'm hosting next week, but I'll see your names at least. Okay, all right, Bo.